Countless financially illiterate people are trying to push information on you, and I need to dispel those myths today. I want to give you an idea of what's happening in the economy so that you can actually use the information, not to be entertained by it. This isn't keeping up with the Kardashians. I want to give you what you need to know. The very first thing here is semiconductors and savings, specifically with what's going on in China. Then I'm going to directly connect that with inflation and the savings of Americans in the US. Something very different is going on today. These two are really polar opposite. And the third thing is the economic trends that are taking place, because ultimately we need to watch these to know if jobs are going to be in a worse scenario in 6 months from now. Or are we really just to be expecting some level of mild economic malaise and we'll return to more growth later? That's what they're trying to tell us right now, here today. Do you want to know all that information and be informed? Well, let's begin. So let's start by talking about semiconductors. In previous videos, I've talked about the fact that the United States had said, we do not want China to access semiconductor technology. This is how we're going to put the squeeze on them. And other countries, Netherlands, Japan, they said, we're going to join that battle. We do not want China to advance. So they're doing everything they can to make sure China can't get their advancement. And that's for a few things. They don't want their economy to grow too much, because then they'll be that superpower. At the same time, they are suggesting that, if they get the semiconductors, they can use them in military, and we don't want their military to advance too far. This is a good thing for national security. That's what they're saying. People have unfollowed me for saying that. These are the quotes. Semiconductor giant ASML, that's out of the Netherlands, sees 2023 sales surge, says China revenue to be steady despite US chip restrictions. You see the way things work? Just like what I talked about, how, we're going to have all these sanctions against Russia. Russia's not going to be able to do anything. And yet all the trains that are bringing elements from China into Europe, they're going through Russia. I mean, and when Russia profits off that. So you got to understand that these things were being told. There's so much to that story. But if you read kind of what I call the mainstream YouTubers, and all of them anyway, I'm tired about mincing words. I'm not doing that anymore. They're not going to inform you. Okay, let's just go with that. Dutch chip equipment maker ASML forecasts a 25% jump in their revenue. It's going to be great, they say. Don't worry about what's going on in China. Now, I'm not so sure that if that they believe that things are going to be a-okay, especially if we see escalation as we have inside of Russia, Ukraine, because China has taken a side. ASML CEO says chip controls will push China to create their own technology. That's important, because China basically is saying, okay, if we can't do it this way, we're going to have to create it on our own. That's going to take time. That's going to take money. The investment needs to be there, but that's what they're going to do. So keep that in mind, okay? Because their economy, in a sense, it will take some time to really develop as a result. If they're not able to access TSMC out of Taiwan, if they're not able to do what they did before, well, then they have to do something else. And as a result, this could generate more jobs. It could generate more need for materials and things. We'll see how they approach that. And this is what I wanted to show you as well, because what's happening in China is quite different, as I've said, from the United States. China's record $2.6 trillion rise in savings fuels revenge spending hopes. Doubts linger over consumers' willingness to deploy excess deposits. So that's the point. Yes, they do have savings, but they're not necessarily the same as you would see in the United States, where they would deplete all their savings if they could. They're a little bit more prudent historically anyway. We'll see what happens in this cycle. There's overestimation on the splash of Chinese consumers. The excess savings won't be easily spent. So they basically just highlight that here in this article. They talk about it and they actually show you a chart. Chinese households delivered most of the growth in deposits last year. You could see that annual rise in deposits looking at households versus non-financial enterprises and other. And you can look at that pink area clearly, no question, above all else. That was a big difference from several years ago when you're locked down. I mean, they're not spending. I mean, that's just the way it goes, right? So that's what we have. Chip sales plunge in China, buffeting global industry. So now we're looking at what's happening within the economy. And if this is kind of a signal, look, if they are not purchasing these semiconductors, they're not putting them in, because look, China is the biggest buyer, the biggest consumer of just about everything, including cell phones, including cars, you can pretty much label anything, and China is the biggest consumer of that. And all of these things now have semiconductors in them. So if they're not purchasing those semiconductors, you can see that taking effect directly with these semiconductor companies. That's why semiconductors, investors, take note, semiconductors are a bellwether of what's happening economically. So pay attention, okay? This is the sharp decline in Chinese chip market drags down global semiconductor industry. We have this exodus of wealthy Chinese accelerates with end of what was going on in 2020, the lockdowns and restrictions. China could face at least $150 billion of capital flight. So it's not as if, hey, everybody's going Jack Ma's leaving and taking everything with him. Probably doesn't have any control over his money anymore, probably doesn't even have anything anymore. That's a different story. But I'm just trying to highlight the fact that everything opens up. Now they're going to say, all right, I need to get my cash out of here. And that's what a lot of them are doing. I don't blame them. They want to have their money in a place where they have more control. If there was capital controls here, well, they don't like that. So they're kind of pulling their money out. And basically this article just highlights the fact that a lot of, the consultants and so on are getting a lot more phone calls from the Chinese citizens saying, we kind of want to move out and take our money elsewhere. It's interesting. Look, I want to compare the difference. You saw the Chinese side. What about the American side? Well, Suze Orman, Americans are short on emergency savings amid dangerous scenario for the economy. It's a more dangerous scenario now than it was during 2020. Americans do not have, you could look at the stats, they show them in here. They're always, roughly the same. Basically just highlighting the fact that everything's going up, people don't have the same cash that they did before, and essentially just highlighting, all right, they don't have enough to pay for, one emergency bill that comes up, paycheck to paycheck. New survey finds 74% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. Have you seen these articles before? Have you seen these studies before? Sometimes it's 60%, sometimes it's 70%. The point is that most people, doesn't matter what income they have, most people live paycheck to paycheck. So be aware of that. I think it's important. It's going to tell you what's going on in reality. Look, you could see this as well. I pulled this up. Looking at the personal savings rate, you're actually looking at this. This is the Fed website for the Federal Reserve, and it is down to a level just briefly. It was at this level back in 2005, and come on, all of that was depleted. All the cash, the stimulus, the tax savings here and there, it's gone. People are just depleting this thing down. There's nothing left. So when they say, oh, there's cash on the sidelines, well, when you look at the actual economy itself, look, there isn't anything left. And we know this, more concrete evidence, because of the fact that credit card usage is at a record high. And by the way, I noticed that what I say here on this channel, there are others that will repeat that. But anyway, I gotta stick to the video. Today is there's a little bit of anger in me. Inflation is cooling, but prices on many items are going to stay high for months. Slowing inflation hasn't brought relief to consumers yet because prices are still well above where they were a year ago. Commodity freight costs are falling, but won't immediately trickle down to consumers, in part due to the supplier contracts and companies' desire to boost profit margins. As long as they can push this, of course they're going to do it. Isn't that the case? Isn't that what's expected? They're going to make as much profit as they possibly can. And you've got the admission now that they are going to pivot. The central banks are ready to pivot. Bank of Canada lifts key rate to 4.5% and plans to hold. That they did increase 25 basis points, 0.25%, But most importantly, it is the fact that they are sticking to this. That's it. It's done. It's done, everybody. You thought for a second that they were going to actually restrict. Not the case. If you look at the M2 money supply, you look at what's, many factors of inflation, there really isn't a slowdown yet. There really is not slowing of much of any kind. Look at it. Look at the total global central bank balance sheets. Yes, they've come down. No doubt about that. We can just look at the Fed, for instance. I happen to memorize the number of $500 billion down from its peak, from 9 trillion, excuse me. Now we're next thing. We just keep going up and zeros don't matter anymore. 9 trillion, bring it down by 500 billion, already discussing the fact that that's it, it's over. We're going to stop here. Bank of Canada already did that. This is unbelievable. The super bubble that's being created right now, that you are being told that you need to simply take the maximum amount of risk into, mortgage your home, do whatever it takes. These things right here are going to create a bubble that is so dangerous. We have never seen anything before. It will happen, and assets will be better to hold on to than cash, certainly. But it's going to create devastating effects for everybody. And that's what we're walking right into. It's frightening. It is frightening for anybody who studies history. I'm obsessed with history and economic history. I've read it all. I've read different countries, different empires, and this is crazy. What they're doing right now is basically a historic anomaly. Okay, 92% of millennial homebuyers say inflation has impacted their purchase plans, but most are plowing ahead anyway. Who cares? Let's just go for it. Where they're getting their money from, I'm not so sure, but maybe their parents are very nice. Okay, I think that's it. Look, let's look at the next aspect here. I want to talk about this. 7 signs that economic growth is starting to falter. If you have time, read this whole thing. I'm just going to show you the titles. It's looking at the business surveys. You can look at the data. There's so many leading indicators. If you search for that, leading indicators, you get these things. These are all coming down. PMIs are the same thing. Hours worked is declining. Looking at the job openings, not good as well. Retail sales are down. Credit card balances are up significantly. Corporate downsizing is happening. You see the layoffs in tech industry and so on. It's starting, let's say. These are the leading indicators that we're talking about. So many things, okay? All the indicators are there showing a slowdown. Port of New York shatters trade record, but latest shipping data hints at California comeback. So now, what happened here? Well, LA Long Beach is not what it once was before. Remember, there was like 100 or 200 ships just waiting for, to dump off their stuff. That changed. Then what happened was a lot of these companies started to reroute around different places. They were starting to go to Texas. They were starting to go to the East. They were doing, what would be, unthinkable because it would really increase the costs. These ships coming from, let's say, Asia or anywhere, China, wherever it might be, just coming around. Now they had to go all the way around to the east side, which is a more expensive ride. So and it takes longer too. So this impacted things, but it balanced it out. That's important. The balance is needed. This is actually a positive development. Whether it stays that way, I'm not so sure, but we can see right here that there are some changes. That's a good sign, you could say, but there's no doubt that when you look at LA Long Beach, it is super slow for this time of year. I mean, really, really slow. And that's not a good sign for the economy. So there's a lot of mixed signals here. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm not here to just tell you, okay, well, this is the one signal, therefore buy Tesla stock. Like if you want that, I can literally think of one guy to watch his YouTube channel, Tesla stock, all in. If you want, you could do that. Across the country, there's a silent frustration brewing about an age-old practice that many say is getting out of hand, tipping. And that brings me to I don't know if I want to call it humor, but that point in the video where I want to ask a question, tipping. What do you think about this? And what they say is, as they show you here, a lot of the places that you go into, you're greeted with an iPad and they kind of say, hey, here you go. And it could be anything from coffee, it could be pretty much anything. And now they're giving you this little iPad thing. And immediately there's like a tip. It's like, okay, 15%, 20%, 25%. And the option for like no tip is like this It's not even on the screen. It's like a separate button. It's almost as if you're implied giving that in an area where you never would have done so before. So they're calling this tipflation. I thought it was funny. I never heard of that before, but tipflation. What do you think about tipflation? Have you ever experienced that? And I want to have that discussion with you down in the comments below. This is a different kind of video, a little bit. I'm going to break free. I want to just highlight the points I think are integral to you. I want to bring different types of videos here in the near future. If you appreciate that, of course, hit that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.